The Rouse Simmons, also lovingly called the Christmas Tree Ship, is famous for being lost in a violent storm on Lake Michigan in 1912 and taking her load of Christmas trees to the bottom of the lake with her. If this ship sounds familiar, it's because she is. I covered her my first year of YouTube in 2022, and this episode is the first of a series I am dubbing Shipwreck Sunday Re-Wrecked. Let me know if there are any of my older episodes you'd like me to cover again. With that said, let's get into it. The Rouse Simmons was built in Milwaukee in 1868 by Allen McClelland and Company and named after the Kenosha politician and businessman Rouse Simmons. The schooner was soon purchased by wealthy lumber magnate Charles H. Hackley of Muskegon, Michigan, and joined his large fleet. Hackley's ships served across most of Lake Michigan's coastline, and the Rouse Simmons became a workhorse, ever reliable as she shipped lumber from company mills to several ports around the lake for around 20 years. At its peak, the schooner was making almost weekly runs between Grand Haven and Chicago. After its service for Hackley, the ship was exchanged numerous times. Many similar schooners were also frequently sold, and they became known as tramp ships. Tramp ships are those that are passed around frequently, and this references the derogatory term, or a merchant vessel that operates on an irregular basis without a fixed schedule or published ports of call. They are often chartered on the spot to carry bulk or general cargo to whichever port the charterer desires. So you can think of it like Tramp from Lady and the Tramp. He has no home, he just wanders wherever. Rouse Simmons would spend some years like this, and in 1910, Herman Schunemann bought an interest in the ship, expanding that to an eighth in 1912. The other shares were owned by Captain Charles Nelson of Chicago, who owned 1/8 and would sail alongside Schunemann on the fatal journey, and 3/4, or the commanding share, were owned by Mans J. Bonner, a businessman from St. James, Michigan. But why on earth was she called the Christmas Tree Ship? The Schunemann brothers, Herman and August, had been trading Christmas trees in Chicago since about the start of the 20th century. Unfortunately, August Schunemann died in November of 1898 aboard the S. Tall, a two-masted schooner about half the size of Rouse Simmons, when it sank in a storm near Glencoe, Illinois, with all hands. His younger brother Herman continued the family business even after his passing and knowing the risks. While many rival traders had sold to wholesalers and local grocers, Schunemann sold directly to Chicago residents at Dockside by Clark Street Bridge. By cutting out the middleman in this way, the trees could be sold cheaply while still making a profit. The venture used the slogan, quote, "Christmas Tree Ship, my prices are the lowest," with the electric Christmas lights and a tree atop the main mast. The trees were sold for between 50 cents and $1, but Herman Schunemann, affectionately known as Captain Santa, also gave away some of the trees for free to needy families. In 2025, Captain Santa would be selling his trees for between $16.70 and $33.40. The average Christmas tree this season, in 2025, costs between $50 and $100, though depending upon the tree type and where you buy it from, it can cost up to $150, so Captain Santa absolutely had the best prices in town. Thank you so much to our amazing YouTube members and patrons. If you'd like to have some awesome perks like episodes a full day in advance, join our YouTube memberships today. As lovely as this all sounds, sailing a vessel in the Great Lakes in late winter is, quite frankly, a nightmare. By this part of the season, most other ships had laid up for the winter months. The Great Lakes freeze over in the winter, and dangerous late autumn storms known as November witches can spell death for any vessel brave enough to venture out. Captain Santa was an experienced ship captain and had been sailing Christmas tree ships to Chicago for almost 30 years at this point. He took Rouse Simmons up to the northern part of Lake Michigan to pick up a load of trees, estimated between 3,000 and 5,500, and departed for the nearly 300-mile trip down south, down the length of Lake Michigan to Chicago on November 22, 1912. The difficult weather had discouraged his competitors from making their own journeys, and snow had covered the tree farms in Michigan and Wisconsin. He hoped the resultant shortage of Christmas trees would lead to a huge profit and solve his financial problems. Despite the Great Lakes continuously being stirred up year after year by storms, November 1912 was relatively quiet, with only one significant storm so far, which affected especially southeastern Michigan and northwestern Ohio. Still, unbeknownst to the crew of Rouse Simmons, a second storm was brewing. The conditions of the day were very poor, with many ships anchoring in port for shelter to avoid being battered by the 60-mile-per-hour winds that could be anticipated in a November gale. Local legends say that some sailors refused to board the ship and that the vessel was unseaworthy. 2 years earlier, the schooner had been towed to port by the Grand Haven Tribune after it was found riding low in the water. Despite this, the journey began at noon with 17 aboard and trees crammed into every possible corner of the ship. The weight of the trees greatly exceeded recommendations, especially in the bad winter weather, and was certainly going to contribute to the coming tragedy. During the night, with storms ravaging the Rouse Simmons, 2 sailors were sent to check the lashings on deck. Both men were swept overboard by a giant wave that collected them, many bundled trees, and a small ship's boat. Now that the schooner was slightly lighter and more maneuverable, Captain Schuneman directed it towards Bailey's Harbor. Suddenly, and tragically, the storm worsened. Ice formed on the sodden trees, increasing the weight on the ship drastically, and the winds battered the schooner. The crew would battle for their lives throughout the night. When the Kewanee Life Saving Station spotted the Rouse Simmons on November 23, 1912, it was low in the water with tattered sails, flying its flag at half-mast to signal distress. Logs from the station show that a surfman spotted the Simmons at 2:50 p.m. and alerted station keeper Nelson Crate. Crate found that the station's gas tugboat had left earlier in the day, and at 3:10 p.m., Crate telephoned the nearest other station. George E. Sogg of Two Rivers, located just south of Kewanee, sent out the powerboat Tuscarora on a rescue mission, but the Simmons was gone. She wasn't the only ship to founder during the storm. The South Shore, the Three Sisters, and the two brothers all suffered similar fates. In December of 1912, Christmas trees and wreckage were reported ashore at Pentwater, Michigan. In 1924, a fishing net trawled up a wallet belonging to Captain Schuneman. The wallet, well preserved because it was wrapped in oilskin, contained business cards, a newspaper clipping, and an expensive memorandum. In 1971, the wreck itself was uncovered by scuba diver Gordon Kent Bellrichard from Milwaukee. He was looking for the Vernon, a 700-ton steamer that had sunk in a storm in October 1887, and had been told about an area in which local fishermen had frequently snagged their nets. When his sonar appeared to have located something, he dived down to a shipwreck on the bed of the lake 172 feet down. Despite his light failing, Bellrichard managed to survey the wreckage with his hands and concluded that he had instead found the Simmons. A forensic study of the wreck suggested that the ship had steerage and was sailing for shelter when it sank. The mizzen mast snapped off above the deck and the upper portion was not located. The main mast was found forward and to the port side of the wreck with the base missing. The foremast is intact and lies nearly parallel but on top of the main mast, suggesting at least one of these masts fell out of the mast step as she sank. Thanks to a lack of wood-eating bacteria in this deep and cold part of Lake Michigan, many of the trees are still in the ship's hold, though 2 were extracted and shown as exhibits. Several items recovered from the Rouse Simmons are now housed in Rogers Street Fishing Village Museum in Two Rivers, including the ship's wheel. The ship's anchor was retrieved and now stands at the entrance to the Milwaukee Yacht Club. The wreck is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and lies within the boundaries of the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary. As for her legacy, the Christmas tree ship lived on through Schuneman's wife Barbara and their 2 daughters. However, in the latter years, they chose to transport the trees by train and merely used a boat as a platform for sale. The practice of transporting trees by schooner ceased in 1920, and the increasing popularity of railways, highways, and tree farms soon made it easier and more affordable for everyone to buy a tree.